Origin Code Academy. Our job is to get you one.
Hi, my name is Jeff Winkler, and I'm with Origin Code Academy, and I'm here today interviewing Stuart.
Hi, I'm Stuart Runyan. I work with Zesty.io. I'm here to talk about some tech stuff.
So what advice would you say you would give to bootcamp students whenever you run into them out in San Diego?
Keep going. Like, it's definitely a daunting task entering the tech world. It's a lot to learn. That can be overbearing at times, but it's definitely rewarding, especially if you're kind of the inquisitive type. It's just kind of a never-ending, sea of learning.
Right.
Yeah.
And where do you usually run into junior developers?
The San Diego tech scene's been growing quite a bit, and there's been a lot of new people kind of entering the market. So a lot of the kind of Origin students are showing up at the local meetups.
Right. What are some common themes that you see amongst the the developers that you kind of look up to, or the ones that are doing real well?
I think who was it? Like Einstein said, like it's like 90% perseverance, 10% intelligence. It's kind of the same thing like programming, where it's like 90% thinking and then 10% like actual like coding.
So then, in your opinion, what percent would be like preparation, attacking a problem, versus like the coding portion?
So I mean, ideally, it's probably about like 80-20. That general 80-20 rule. Like you definitely want to kind of like think through the problem as much as possible, especially when you get to like production level, the product. You really have to think through a lot of the different cases that you're going to solve.
Can you kind of describe the hiring market if you were to be the expert on the San Diego dev hiring market? Like, what does that look like if you're a developer or an employer, in your opinion?
So it's definitely, the San Diego market is starving to hire people, specifically for senior people. As far as the entry-level stuff goes, typically with software companies or kind of funded companies, you don't see a lot of entry-level work there, especially if they're early stage, just because business-wise it doesn't make sense for them.
Right.
We actually have a huge digital agency presence in San Diego, and digital agencies constantly need entry-level work. They have clients who need websites built out, landing pages, and they typically deal with a lot of high turnover, where you have an entry-level person come in, they're there for a year, 2 years, they kind of build up their skill set, and then they move on to a more challenging job.
Sure.
So they're typically looking for entry-level work.
Okay. Yeah. Both in senior and entry level, what are some of the skills specifically in San Diego, technical skills or languages or frameworks that you're like hearing about a lot that you think might kind of slowly take over?
Like React, extremely popular right now. San Diego actually still has a lot of people who are using like Angular 1, so that's definitely hireable. Angular 2 just came out yesterday, 2 days ago.
Right, yeah.
Right, so that's going to be interesting to see how that kind of picks up. So it's definitely a good idea to pick one of those two: React, Angular 2, Ember. Ember's also a really good one. But at the end of the day, when you want to get towards move towards senior, you just have to get your JavaScript up to a point where you should be able to come to any framework or any solution and just understand the architecture.
Okay. So kind of taking off of that, like what advice would you give yourself kind of back then looking at your career so far?
I guess, get a mentor. Mentor is huge. I have a mentor who was my first boss, awesome guy, great, really smart at tech, but he mentors me not so much on the tech side, but more of like the career path side,
Okay.
When I go to make a job switch or I want to kind of start exploring different avenues, I always go to him first.
Okay. If you're looking for your first entry-level programming job, what's something you look for in companies, or maybe certain things you should be like wary of?
I guess one of the biggest things is really use your Google Foo and research a company you're looking at. You should know a lot about them. You need to know what their business is. You know who their clientele is or their customer base is. If I went into an interview now, I would have to do a practical coding session with one of the developers.
Okay. And then do you use any other kind of resources? I know Glassdoor gets a lot of, but it can be hit or miss. Do you put a lot of faith in some of those resources when you're...
So to be honest, after my first job, every job afterwards has been a networking situation. It's been word of mouth. I've met someone. So my first job, I scoured the internet. I was on Craigslist all day long. Every Craigslist post was, oh, you need 5+ years of experience in this. And
right.
Those, by the way, those postings, untrue. Like that is like HR departments or someone who's not actually, typically hiring the role,
Right.
putting up the information. It's usually they go and scrape like, oh, junior developer, this is what I found. Let me just post that.
Hey, you're preaching to the choir on that one. So I know senior developers can be super opinionated
Yeah.
and maybe somewhat pessimistic on certain viewpoints. How do you handle that when you don't really have a huge knowledge base?
Try to take it with a grain of salt. Always kind of look from that other perspective. Is there reason why they're responding this way? At the end of the day, though, sometimes you have personality clashes, right? Some people just are difficult to work with.
So when a junior developer gets stuck on a problem, right? You don't want them sitting there for 3 days because they don't want to ask for help. But you also don't want them asking you questions every 10 minutes to where they're bothering you per se.
Yeah.
So what's a good process or maybe a timeline for them to kind of like deal with that internally, to kind of ask for help, but also not to be not productive for like several days in a row?
Yep. So the big rule is like you have to go Google it, right? You have to give it 15 minutes, half an hour, whatever kind of the culture is. You have to give it the allotted time. You actually have to put the due diligence in, go, look up things, do your research, Google. And then if you aren't getting like slow headway, like if you're just at a wall and like none of this is making sense, I can't figure any of this out, that's when you go to your lead or your senior. If you feel like you're going down like a hole and you're getting stuck, take a break, right? Walk away for 5 minutes, come back, try to reapproach it with like a fresh head.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thanks again, Stuart, for coming in. Appreciate you answering all the questions. And if you want to touch on also what Zesty does.
Yeah, definitely. So Zesty.io is a enterprise website platform. We are specifically geared towards mid-market to lower-end enterprise for things like franchises, CPGs. Basically, our goal is we want to kind of remove the constraints on marketers and their ability to work efficiently.